General Hospital today will reveal. In the complex world of General Hospital, a town as expansive and emotionally volatile as Port Charles is rarely short of relationships, familial, romantic, or platonic. Yet for Michael Corinthos, despite his long-standing presence and deeply rooted family legacy, one glittering void remains: the absence of true, unconditional friendships. As friends increasingly observe, Michael finds himself navigating one of the darkest periods of his life, emotionally isolated and trapped within the same familial web that often contributes to his internal struggles. Though surrounded by people who claim to care, there is a profound hollowness in the quality of those connections, leaving Michael emotionally starved for the type of friendship that exists beyond duty and bloodline. For someone as central to the Corinthos and Quartermain dynasties as Michael, one might expect him to have an extensive support system. Yet, in reality, his circle appears devastatingly small. His only genuine confidants seem to be Jason Morgan and Dante Falconry, two men who, while fiercely loyal, are both deeply entangled in his family affairs and carry burdens of their own. Their bond is born out of more shared trauma and mutual allegiance than from the lightness and reciprocity found in traditional friendship. This dependence on Jason and Dante, however noble, also underscores a troubling pattern. Michael has rarely been afforded the space to form organic, emotionally safe friendships outside the gravitational pull of his lineage. The lack of a broader support network becomes all the more evident when Michael is thrust into personal crisis. Whether facing betrayals, ethical dilemmas, or questions of legacy and fatherhood, Michael's isolation becomes a theme in itself. He seldom reaches out to peers. His vulnerabilities are mostly contained within the walls of the Corinthos estate or buried beneath his corporate persona. In moments when most people would turn to a close friend for comfort or guidance, Michael often turns inwards, or worse, to calculated decisions fueled by pain and distrust. This emotional bottling intensifies the darkness he feels, as there are few outlets through which he can truly decompress or receive non-judgmental support. Fans have noted that this void is not due to lack of opportunity, but rather a narrative oversight that has persisted over time. Since his return from Germany following a severe injury, there has been a marked absence of personal growth in his area. Rather than allowing Michael to re-enter Port Charles with a newfound openness to connection, the storylines have doubled down on his isolation. His romantic ties remain strained, his familial bonds often conflicted, and any chance at forming a meaningful friendship outside of Jason and Dante is seemingly dismissed. It's as if the writers have chosen to freeze his emotional development in a cycle of obligation, duty, and trauma, a choice that feels increasingly limiting as Michael ages and his responsibilities grow heavier. Social media has become a haven for these observations, with longtime GH viewers questioning why Michael remains so emotionally adrift. Some argue that the character is trapped by the very legacies that shaped him. Others believe that his storyline lacks the emotional balance that comes from having at least one non-family member who sees him, not as a Corinthos or a Quartermain, but as a human being in need of connection. The outpouring of concern from fans reflects a deeper truth. Watching a character deteriorate in silence is painful, particularly when that silence is the result of a narrative neglect rather than natural evolution. What Michael needs now more than ever is a relationship that exists outside the chessboard of Port Charles politics, a connection not born out of shared secrets, criminal alliances, or family loyalty, but one forged in understanding, empathy, and vulnerability. Without it, he risks becoming emotionally calcified, making decisions from a place of fear rather than hope, control rather than trust. As he confronts the darkest hours of his life, burdened by moral dilemmas, grief, and the weight of the legacy, the absence of a true friend could be the very factor that determines whether he survives intact or fractures entirely. And in a town where power and betrayal are daily currency, the cost of that emotional bankruptcy may prove far more devastating than any corporate war or family feud. The unraveling of Michael Corinthos' journey in General Hospital has become a case study in long-form emotional deterioration. Stripped of meaningful friendships and cornered by family-driven plotlines, Michael is now reaching a point of narrative suffocation. The loss of his last semblance of a personal connection, however flawed that friendship may have been, signals more than just another Port Charles fallout. It marks a slow erasure of his humanity, inching him toward a version of himself that is reactive hardened and dangerously alone. In a show where nearly every character maintains overlapping social or emotional bonds outside of their core family units, Michael's increasing insularity feels not only intentional but cruel. And fans are beginning to take notice of just how barren his emotional world has become. One comment that has echoed across online forums encapsulates the mood perfectly. "I know the rebuilding arc is so happening, but it's bizarre that Michael's only real friends during a crisis are his brother and uncle." It's not an unreasonable point. In any real-world equivalent, a man with Michael's resources, social visibility, and emotional baggage would likely be surrounded by a circle of friends, colleagues, even adversaries who serve as mirrors or emotional sparring partners. But instead, Michael is a ghost drifting through storylines, not fully alive in any of them. Even his relationship with Jason, long depicted as the closest bond he has, it feels diminished in recent arcs. Jason is a sounding board, not a challenger or a source of emotional revelation. Dante, though often portrayed as the more morally grounded of the two, remains restrained in ways that prevent Michael from experiencing the catharsis or growth that a more honest friendship might provoke. Critics have grown increasingly sharp in their observations. One pointedly noted, "They destroyed the only friendship he had, but even that was weak to begin with, considering Michael stole his friend's wife." This remark cuts deep not just because it's true within the complex web of GH history, but because it reinforces the idea that Michael's connections are transactional, not emotional. His relationships begin and end around betrayal, obligation, or circumstance. There's very little that's pure in the way Michael relates to others. Even his romantic arcs feel more like story devices than emotionally resonant journeys, leaving the character suspended in a limbo where trust is a currency he neither gives nor receives. It's no wonder that when crisis strikes, Michael retreats into a bunker built entirely of legacy and guilt. This emotional vacuum isn't just unhealthy for Michael, it's narratively unsustainable. One writer asked, "Is there any other character on GH who only has family to talk to?" The question is rhetorical but lands with impact. The answer is clearly no. In a soap opera built on emotional entanglements from cafes to courtrooms, the fact that Michael doesn't organically intersect with anyone outside his bloodline is a glaring anomaly. When the writers attempt to create tension or vulnerability, they're forced to recycle the same dynamics: Sunny's shadow, Carly's judgment, Jason's stoicism, or Willow's oscillating presence. There is no fresh air in his world, and it shows. It's this claustrophobia that leads fans to propose surprising alternatives. "Call me crazy," one viewer wrote, "but maybe Trina should somehow be involved. Add a little spice. Let them be friends." It would be weird and awkward since he's her best friend's brother, but it would work. On the surface, this idea seems like a stretch. Michael and Trina operate in completely different circles. But in its own way, it's a cry for something new. Something outside of the predictable boundaries that have shackled Michael for years. A connection like that, while unorthodox, could finally allow Michael to develop in a way he hasn't since his teen years. Trina's youth vibrancy and emotional intelligence could force Michael to shed the armor he's grown so accustomed to wearing. For her, the relationship could be a test of her empathy, patience, and moral strength. For both, it could be transformative, strangely human, in a way that General Hospital desperately needs right now. The tragedy of Michael Corinthos is that he was never allowed to fully grow into the man he was meant to become. Every moment of clarity is swiftly overtaken by another obligation. Every attempt at independence is pulled back into the undertow of legacy power struggles and inherited trauma. The constant recycling of themes, ELQ drama, Corinthos mob ties, Quartermain expectations has created a character with no true center. He is defined only by the roles others impose upon him: son, father, CEO, brother, pawn. Rarely is he simply a man grappling with grief, guilt, hope, or the desire for companionship. This absence of identity makes it harder for audiences to connect and even harder for the character to evolve. But there is still time. The writers could choose to inject life back into Michael's arc, not through yet another courtroom battle or business betrayal, but through something smaller, more intimate. A conversation on a park bench. A disagreement that leads to introspection. A lunch with someone unexpected. A crisis not born from family expectations but from personal vulnerability. These moments, if earned and sustained, could break the cycle of narrative repetition and allow Michael to become not just a symbol of the biz, Corinthos Quartermain dynasty, but a fully realized human being. Until then, Michael will remain in limbo, visible yet unreachable, powerful yet powerless, surrounded yet alone. And perhaps that's the greatest tragedy of all, a man with everything, still missing the one thing that matters most. Someone who sees him not for the family he was born into, but for the person he could still become.